Welcome back everyone, this is Mindy. In today's video, I'm going to be doing some watercoloring on black cardstock with metallic watercolor paints using this beautiful Bouquet Builder 6 stamp set from Waffle Flower Crafts. The cardstock that I'm going to be watercoloring on is this Stonehenge cold press black cardstock. I picked this up after watching Christina Warner use it to watercolor. So I did already go ahead and cut a piece down to fit my large MISTI, and lining up a couple of the images off of the Bouquet Builder 6 stamp set. Then I'm just going to prep that cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. That way my embossing powder only sticks to my ink and not the rest of my cardstock. Then I'm going to take some embossing ink and ink up my images really well, close the door of my MISTI, and give that just a nice even pressure to stamp those images down. Now I personally like to stamp twice just to make sure that I do have a complete coverage. Once those are stamped, I'm going to sprinkle on some champagne embossing powder. This is from Gina Designs. So I'll sprinkle that on, tap off any excess, and then I do want to make sure I have my heat gun warming up off on the side, and I can bring that to my cardstock and heat set my images. Then I like to take a Swiffer cloth and just brush off any of that excess powder. Here is a quick look at the metallic watercolors that I'll be using today. These are from Altenew, and they are just absolutely stunning on white or black cardstock. I'm taking a little dropper and I'm adding about 2 to 3 drops of water into the colors that I'll be using today. I'm going to be doing the red and the dark green. And then I'm going to start watercoloring. Now I did find it was hard to do any type of shading with it. So what you can do, or what I did, was I wet my brush, I mixed up the paint in that little tray, and then I'm painting it onto my cardstock and into those little spaces on my image. Every now and then I'll go over and dip my paintbrush into some water and try to thin it out. That just helps the black cardstock show through a little bit more, and it helped me give a little bit of dimension to my flowers, so I did have some darker areas. And of course, when you add water and thin out that paint, that'll give you some lighter areas. So here's a close look. Now these are still wet, but you can see they do provide just a gorgeous metallic shimmer. So I will continue to watercolor all of the images. I'm doing all of the flower petals first. The bigger petals, it's a little easier to see that I'm putting on a thicker coat of that paint, or I'm not diluting it as much when it's towards the inside of the flower, but then I wet the paintbrush and I drag that paint out to try and thin that color down just a little bit, just to try and give these flowers some contrast and dimension. Then I'll move on to the leaves, and I am using the darker shade of green for the leaves. The smaller ones, it's really hard to do any type of shading with them, so I just straight painted on that metallic watercolor. I am using a size 1 paintbrush for this. It is pretty small to get into those smaller areas. And I'm working on the Waffle Flower Media Mat, which is really great for ink blending or watercoloring because the mat kind of helps your cardstock stay in place. It's not sliding all over the place, so I really do enjoy working on it. I'll set that off on the side to dry for a little while, and I'm going to work on the front of my card. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from this Sweet Sentiments stamp set. It has a great variety of sentiments, really for any occasion. So this is just some black cardstock that I'm using. I'm prepping that again with an anti-static powder tool. I'm going to ink up my sentiment with that embossing ink and stamp that down onto the cardstock. And then I'm also using the champagne embossing powder so that it matches my floral images. And then heat setting that. And I do wipe that off with a Swiffer cloth as well. Now I'm going to die cut my images out once my panel is completely dry. So I'm lining that up. When you put on your purple tape or Post-it tape, whatever you're using, make sure your tape is on the die and the outside because this will rip your paper. And then I like to put a piece of copy paper on top of that so it doesn't transfer any ink or metallic onto my cutting plates. And now you can see that did rip the cardstock, but not my image. So here's a close-up look of those beautiful metallics. I think it's such a great change up to just regular watercolors. It really adds some interest to your cards. Now for the assembly of my card, I just figured out where I wanted my images to go. This first piece, the larger one, I'm just adding some Connect glue to the back, and I'm going to glue that straight down onto my black card front. And this glue does go on white, but it dries clear. So if there's any that seeps out from underneath, it's going to dry clear so you won't see it. And for my bloom, I'm adding black foam squares to this that help, being that they're black, it's going to disguise it when you look at it from the side. And then I'll just arrange that around my sentiment and push down to adhere that when I'm ready. Then I'll just flip that over and trim off any excess. You can see I did attach my card front to a white card base, and that will finish off the card. Very simple, but I think it's just such a unique style and design to watercolor these in metallic inks, and you can see that gorgeous shine that it gives and that little bit of dimension. I hope you enjoyed today's card. I will have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well, which will be linked down below. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I'll see you next time.